Alright, so hello viewers, welcome back to my channel. Today I have my first collaboration video with KyleS.
Hi everyone!
One of my loyal viewers. Today we're going to actually let Kyle talk a little bit about, I believe, his experience with depression, am I right?
Yeah. I'm kind of new to talking about this sort of stuff, so bear with me if I say some things that are kind of, like, innocently insensitive. This is really just not really... I have a friend that talks about this sort of stuff, like, she has her own channel, but, yeah, this really isn't my thing, so it's kind of new for me, but I figured, you know, I kind of like the idea of, like, I like the idea of Spyro and talking about sort of things like that. Obviously, I don't have a way to record Spyro, so Noel was very nice and let me play Crash.
Hey, yes, of course. Well, the next best thing, you know, if you can have Spyro, you can have Crash. So,
yeah.
Hey. They're both amazing.
Really, they are hand in hand, so, I mean...
Yes.
Yeah. So... The other thing is I'm not, like, officially diagnosed with depression, and a lot of people would tell you that I don't really even have it. It's not really that I'm depressed, it's more that I have had, like, super depressing experiences in my life. Like,
absolutely,
times where, you know, like, I've been probably the lowest I could possibly be.
Right.
You know, that sort of thing.
Right, and that's just as important. I feel like a lot of times that gets overlooked, and I'm like, you know, like... It's just as big of a deal whether it's constant or in patches, you know?
Yeah, and then also there's just a lot of people like me, we don't really know how to express ourselves in this sort of way.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, this is sort of something that, like, I would never really do anything like this in any other context, but just sort of, because I can sort of play a close video game to me while I'm doing it, makes it a little easier for me.
Easier to talk about,
yeah.
Right, that's cool, that's cool, that's good to hear.
Yeah, so anyway, I guess I've sort of rambled on enough. I'm like halfway through this one level, so I'll just get going now.
Well, you're pretty good at Crash then, if you're already
dude, awesome. Don't even get me started. So...
It's your game.
It is. I'm KyleS, as was mentioned, and I've been sort of depressed. Like I said, it's kind of, I'm not really officially, but you know. And the thing about that is, so I've been depressed for probably about half my life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm 19 now, and I started when I was like, you know what? I shouldn't say half my life. Actually, yeah, half my life, because I'm 19 now, and it started when I was 10, around that age.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so basically a decade.
Oh, definitely. What happened was I started going to a different school that was, that was sort of my first experience with bullying as well. I was bullied for, like, in retrospect, it was just, like, the stupidest stuff. I'll watch my mouth so you can stay monetized. The stupidest...
Oh, you're good,
the stupidest stuff, though, honestly. Like, I think the first thing that sort of, like, opened up the floodgates was I had a Wii instead of a PS3 or an Xbox 360. So that was enough to, like... And, like, I wouldn't play COD, I'd play Mario. So they were like, oh, you're a little... You kind of got free reign. I didn't really know how to express myself properly because I was like 10 years old. I was in the 6th grade when this all was happening. I was very young. And I remember my first experience with... Well, my depression for me has always sort of been more like suicidal thoughts and feelings. The idea of... But the thing is that it's never been... Well, it used to be because I was really sad. But then as I got older, it sort of turned more into, I don't want to die because I'm sad. I want to die because I'm just sort of apathetic to life, and I don't really want to deal with anything anymore. Which is really, I think, is scarier, because I do believe that apathy is the scariest human emotion.
It is, I agree with that.
Yeah, because just the fact that something bad can happen and someone can just not care and have no reaction to anything, no matter how minor, is just... It just scares me, and it's really hard to put into words, so I'm really happy you agree, so I don't really have to
I do.
explain too much of it.
And I've heard that is a common thing with depression.
Yeah.
I've heard that, so yeah.
Everyone says like, oh, you're... they also don't go hand in hand, you know. People think that depression and being suicidal are sort of like one leads to the other, but from my experience, that's not always the case. Like, I've been depressed for no reason, but I haven't wanted to kill myself. And then also I've wanted to die, but I haven't been sad. So it's just sort of like... Yeah, I do want to clarify, because every time you talk about this, you have to add this disclaimer. I'm not feeling suicidal or depressed right now.
Oh,
It probably goes without saying. Yeah, it's still helpful to mention, just because, you know, you never know. Because someone will seem fine, just because they're not saying anything doesn't mean that they are.
Right, exactly, absolutely, absolutely.
So, let's see, what else is there? I've also found that, just sort of, a lot of it comes from just sort of, I don't know how to mention it. I do also get, like, when I'm stressed, I guess. I don't know how to, this is kind of hard to word, because like I said, this is the part of me not knowing this sort of thing comes into play. I don't really know how to handle myself. But it's, I don't know, it doesn't always come from a place of, I'm sorry, I don't know how to word it.
No, you're fine, I do that all the time. There's no time rush here, man. We're just chilling and talking, and you're good, you're good.
Nice. But yeah, I mean, you know, it can be really hard. It's also hard in the sense of the reactions people will have to it is really hard as well.
Oh yeah.
Just because if you, like, I mean, people are worried, but then also they have, just sometimes they can react in ways that makes you feel even worse. I remember my first time that I ever attempted suicide, when I wasn't really even suicide, it was just sort of more of like a public act of self-harm. I was just in a classroom, like, being bullied, and I couldn't take it. And they sent me to the principal's office, and then they called my mom, and then because I was in I think the 7th grade when this happened. But it did begin as early as the 6th grade, but 7th and 8th was when it got really ugly. It was good for 9 and 10. 11 kind of got a little tricky, but that's sort of the worst it's been in a long time.
Those are hard years.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, school had a lot to do with it, but it wasn't like, oh, the system was busted. It was just sort of the crowd you were in, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's
more about the people, more about the students than anything. Yeah.
So and when my mom came to take me home, she didn't say like, she kept, like, kind of, I don't want to say she was like harassing me, but she was sort of asking a lot of really panicked questions that I couldn't really respond to. She was asking me a lot of things. I remember she wouldn't let me go into my room with the door closed, and that was sort of when I realized like, oh, like, people aren't going to treat me the same anymore. My life was going to change from here on out, and I got really upset.
Yeah,
versus when it happened again in the 8th grade. I might be mixing stories here, but I remember I was sent to I had a teacher that was just, I did not get along with her when I was in the 8th grade. Like, things were good at first, but we just really, our personalities really just didn't really mesh that well. Because she was sort of like, she wanted a lot of the focus to be on her. Not even from a teaching perspective, but she just had a bit of an ego, I found. And then meanwhile, you had me, which was someone who I was a huge shit disturber, not gonna lie. When I was in school. Even before all this stuff happened, like in elementary school, I was always being sent to the office. So, I mean, like, this wasn't really anything new for me. And I remember when I was in the 8th grade, there was this girl, I won't, like, name names or anything, on, like, the 0.01% chance she's watching this. She's not really much for video. She's not much for video games, but you never know. I think mental health was a big thing. Yeah, you never know. Someone could link it to her, whatever.
Yeah.
In the 8th grade, she was sort of we were never, like, dating or anything, but just a lot of the relationship and interaction that we had sort of did solidify a lot of how I handle things, like, even now. A lot of my viewpoints and expressions are from when her and I would interact all the time. And I remember, I made like I did make some mistakes, sort of thing, and I tried to correct them, but then rumors started spreading, and I couldn't really defend against it. So I remember one day, like, the teacher sent me to the office. The vice principal basically said, like, I'm tired of dealing with you, so just sit here until I feel like handling you. And I was like, yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah, but that's no, but like that's how bad it got, to the point where that was just sort of how they would regularly talk to me, and I was like, okay, you know what, whatever. Like, I mean, I wasn't really fazed by it at first. I'm like, yeah, you know, you're a POS as well. I pulled up my DS and I just started playing Mario. Because I was just sitting in a room, it was a conference room, I was just sitting in there alone. So, like, no one was watching, so I played Mario, and then it got to a point, I think it was one of the RPGs, so I was grinding, and it got to a point where it was mindless. And when I'm doing something that's so mindless, like, obviously, like, you know, your mind begins to wander a little bit.
Right,
but
yeah, for sure.
I remember I started looking at the situation I was in, and I thought to myself, like, I don't like any of this. I don't like where this is going. I'm not happy with how I'm handling my friend. I'm not happy with how anything's going. And I was really sad, and I was like, what am I doing with my life? What am I doing with any of this stuff? Everything is going downhill. Like, it just kept spiraling and spiraling, and this was my first experience with self-harm. It wasn't even anything that big. It was really dirty, though. Like, there was a thumbtack that was sitting on, like, the little whiteboard. So I remember I took that, and I was, like, just, like, kind of, I don't even want to say slitting my wrist, because it was more like just a scratch, really. It was just sort of, like, really light scratches, but, like, enough to shed blood.
Definitely,
and
definitely,
that was,
yeah, it's still a form of self-harm.
And then, so I was doing that, and then I heard, and the principal came back in, and he said, he basically just like, alright, I don't give a shit about you, just leave. So I went back to class, because it was like the end of the day, right before Christmas break, so everyone was like, yeah, whatever.
Right.
And I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't have mentioned this is going to get pretty ugly.
Oh, no, I can always have, like, that at the beginning of the video. I mean, that's the whole point of mental health. That's good, that's good. I want the truth, that, you know, you want to hear people's real experiences, so
definitely.
you're good.
And I remember I showed my friend that I'd gotten in a fight with over what happened. Well, because we'd been in a fight because of everything. I don't remember exactly what, because it was so long ago, but I did or said something that was like, hey, that's not cool, or whatever. So, you know, I went back and I showed her what happened. Like, I showed her my wrist, and she just kind of looked at me just with, like, a blank expression on her face. She'd already found, like, other friends by this point, because before that, like, she was a new student, so before this, I was kind of her only friend. But when we got into a fight, like, she found more, and also what hurt was that the friends that she found were girls. So, like, a lot of, like, I obviously, you know, as nice as I could be, I can't compete with another girl. Like, you know.
Yeah.
It's
just kind of like a bonding type thing that, girls just, they kind of click, and most of the time.
So I knew that much. I kind of knew, like, we might not have what we had before, but we can still probably go back to something great. And then she sent me a text after, because I took the bus home every day. She sent me a text, and she was like, you know, are you okay? What happened? Like, are you going to be all right? And I'm thinking, like, okay, this is my chance. Like, if I'll just say something, like, I'll be upfront and honest. I'll talk about what's going on in my life and everything. And, you know, it'll all be good. I severely botched it, like, hardcore botched it, to a point where, like, looking back, I'm like, how did that even happen? But basically, what I meant to say was, like, part of it was I felt bad about what happened. I want to talk about what's going on, but I don't know how. But because I didn't know how, it came out as like, oh, I did that because of you. Which is never something you want to hear. That was not what I intended. I do want to clarify. That's not what I meant to say. I was just really bad with communicating my words back then. Because I was in the 7th grade. Or 8th grade at this point. So I was like 12, 13 years old.
Yeah, that's ages ago,
you know, it's not really my thing, so... Yeah, you know, that's what it was. And, I mean, she never really talked to me after that, which, honestly, looking back, I don't blame her. If someone said that to me, I wouldn't talk to them. You know.
Yeah, it's hard. That is a hard thing to communicate when someone has like really altered your life with their actions, but then you also you don't. It's not that you're trying to blame them, but at the same
yeah, it's
time,
just you don't like. I didn't know how to like. Yeah, June 2013.
Okay.
A lot of just places in Calgary, which is where I was born and raised, and especially near where I went to school, were flooded over with like heavy rain, heavy water. There were not a lot of casualties. The main casualties were people who were trying to whitewater raft on the flood. But like, if you're gonna do that, then are you really surprised it's not gonna end well? Like, I mean, you don't want to say they deserved it, but like, they clearly weren't making the smartest decision.
Yeah.
No.
Wasn't the best idea. Absolutely not. No. Dang.
And so because of that, my school was affected by it. Like, my school got flooded. It was during like the exam week, so not really a lot of people were at the school, thank goodness. But like, so I never saw her again after that. We were supposed to have like one last day. Everybody who was like writing a test got a free pass because of what happened. Mm-hmm.
Right, surely.
And you know, so that it was fine in that regard. But then also,
right.
So I never did get to see her again. The last time we ever interacted was she needed an eraser for the test that we were about to write, because we wrote a math test and that was it, and then the floods happened. She needed an eraser for the math test, and nobody had one, but I had one. So she was really happy, really like overplay. Like I think she's probably just overplaying her happiness to make me feel better, maybe, or maybe she just was really that happy. I don't know. She was the kind of no, she was just the kind of kid that took school really seriously. So maybe she was really that happy, you know.
Yeah, yeah. It's possible. It's possible.
So I remember she was like, oh, nobody, like she was freaking out. She's like, nobody has an eraser, and I'm like, I have an extra eraser. And she's like, you do? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, can I borrow it? And I'm like, yeah.
Oh my god.
And she's like, oh, sweet. And then she, and I remember she ran out of the room, because I told her it was in my locker. She ran out of the room, and like I followed her, and she was standing in front of my locker, banging on it, like, thump, 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 let's go! Thump, 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 let's go! Thump, 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 let's go! So I opened it up, I give it to her, and she's like, yeah, I love you! And she runs away. To go write the exam, and that was like the last interaction I remember having with her.
The whole time, all you needed to fix the problem was just to give her an eraser, man. That's a pretty...
This is one mistake you can erase.
Easy, huh?
Oh, man. But anyway, so... Thank you, I love puns.
That was a good one. You're welcome, me too.
Sweet.
Right there with
But anyway, so I bring that up because, you know, it's not a fun time. It really wasn't. But this was, of course, this was long after everything sort of went awful. So what ended up happening was, and then right after, like, this whole thing happened, like, was showing her the cuts and everything, my parents announced they were having a divorce. So I had to shift from, like, and then my mother ended up leaving, like, due to complications. Like, she kind of had to leave. So I went from, like, going to my mother for everything to going to my dad. And my dad and I had, like, we didn't really have a lot of interactions with each other. Because, like, he was the breadwinner, so he was always out working. And then by the time he'd get home, he was just too tired to do anything with us. We didn't have any common interests, him and I. So, like, there was nothing we could bond over. Yeah. You know, we wouldn't find stuff that we both liked until much later. But, yeah.
Right.
And,
wow.
Definitely a lot of changes that were way too fast for me as well.
Right.
And I'm also not the biggest fan of change, especially after that. Yeah.
Me either. Me either. Oh, I hate it. So that's my worst issue. Yep. It's no fun.
But she was so I had to go, and that was hard too. Not having my mother around. And having to...
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily like a stranger, just sort of more like a casual acquaintance, like a coworker you kind of see every now and then, but don't really talk with. And then that ended up being like the person I had to
Right,
go
yeah.
to when I needed something, like the sole person I would rely on. And that was a little hard for both of us.
Right, which isn't
you know.
as comforting.
Yeah. Like, you know, and then it was just grade 8. I remember I was the worst that it had been in terms of like the depression, because this was one of the cases where the depression and the suicidal were just sort of mixed.
Oh, that's the worst. Yeah.
So and it got to a point where I just didn't have the energy to even care. Like I didn't have the energy to try to take my life. So it was just like a mindless, endless slog through my days, and it was one of the worst things. But things did look up. I met a really close friend of mine. This
Awesome.
dude who's like, we just recently started talking again. We couldn't talk because like we had no way to communicate. Then he got a Facebook and he added me, and he's like, "Hey, you remember me?" And I'm like, "Oh, I remember you." And we were like 2 peas in a pod. He made my bus rides home. Yeah, he really helped me out.
Aww.
He really helped me out a lot.
That's awesome.
Because as awful as school would be, I would always have the bus ride home to look forward to. Because, you know, we would play video games together. We would, you know, just be loud and boisterous like boys were, and it was fun. It was just fun.
That's awesome.
So that did help out a lot. And my dad handled things a lot differently than my mother did, because I remember there was one time where I got sent home again. It wasn't for the same thing. I think this was just, I don't remember what the context was, but I did get sent home again, and my dad had to come get me instead of my mom. And while my mom was like bombarding me with questions about what had happened, I think I'd gotten into a fight with my teacher or something, and she was like, "Okay, you need to leave."
Oh yeah.
Whereas my mom was like bombarding me with questions over what happened during the car ride home, and then like kind of keeping a close eye on me. My dad had the exact opposite thing. It was a very silent, very somber car ride home, and then like no one was really saying anything. No one was trying to communicate. We get home, and then like I walk into my room, sit on my bed. I'm like, okay, this is where the lecture comes in. This is where the "you messed up" comes in. He stands in my doorway and he says, "Okay, see you later."
Right.
And I'm like, "Where are you going?" And he's like, "I'm going back to work." And I'm like,
it's like
yeah.
Everything's
I'm like,
chill.
You're going to work, and
Dads
he's
are
like,
so
yeah.
chill sometimes.
And I'm like, you're not gonna like come like, you know, ridicule me or whatever for messing up. And he's like, you know what? I'm gonna trust the words of my boy over what some teacher has to say. And that's when I knew like things are gonna be okay. Things are gonna get a little better.
Well, that's Oh, good. So you ended up being good with your dad and stuff.
We got to know each other a lot better. He did end up getting remarried. So now I have a stepmother and a stepbrother, and the stepbrother and I were like super close. We bonded over Skylanders of all things. So there's the Spyro connection, I guess.
Interesting. Hey, there you go.
Yeah. Well, of course he didn't grow up with like the classic Spyro. He grew up with that Legend stuff. So.
Right.
Well, I don't. I'm sorry. I didn't mean that condescendingly. Well, I had.
Yeah.
Oh god. I had my younger brother gave me a lot of purpose in my life. He gave me because I didn't, like I was talking about, I didn't really have a direction. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was going to become. I didn't know if I was going to survive past the end of the semester, if I was going to, you know. But I remember he did look up to me. And it was, the comparison I always used was, it was like Wreck-It Ralph and Vanellope. That's sort of what it was, because that's basically what our situation was now I'm this big guy that I'm like, oh, like everything's going wrong, I'm not really happy with anything, and then like this little kid comes along, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be like an awesome older brother sort of thing. That's what my life is gonna be now. Yeah.
Aww.
You know, the stepmother sort of started showing her true colors, and made life very hard for me and my older sister. My older sister got like, you know, thrown out of the house, kicked out, how many times? So not only did I have to start going through life without my mother, I had to go through life without my sister. And I was living with these people. My parents were, I was 13 when my parents split up. I was like a couple weeks away from 13 when my mom left, and then when my sister left, I was older. I was in high school, so I was maybe like 15. But it was, yeah.
Jeez, that's young though.
You know, a lot of things happen. I've never really like related with other guys too well, because I'm very feminine, because like I said, my dad was always around, so like I would always do like the womanly activities and stuff, so that's where I feel more comfortable. I didn't and I feel kind of like awful in retrospect, but I didn't think that like mental health was a real thing, just because like the way that
what's society?
the way that people, because also that was back before it was really a mainstream topic.
Right.
Because this would have been around like
still,
the turn of the decade. You don't have depression. You're just really sad about something. It's like, okay, what am I really sad
exactly.
about?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what else? Yeah, what else do you want? Do you have anything else you want to talk about, or because you've got free reign?
I don't know. It's definitely really hard. But I guess if I had to give like any sort of closing advice to anybody out there who might be struggling with depression or suicidal or anything in between, just know that you're really not as alone as you feel. That might sound pretty general, but I mean, there's always ways to get help. There is always
exactly.
And sometimes all you have to do is just talk about it. Sometimes all you have to do is just bring it up to someone. You can go, well, not just a random person, obviously someone that you trust, but you go to you can go to therapists. Therapy has been a really big help for me, not even just for this sort of thing, but just like when I'm feeling, because I also have a lot of like feelings of inferiority. It's like I don't always feel like I'm good enough. Which is why I haven't tried dating in like a year, because I'm just like, oh, I'm not worth it. Yeah, I feel. But like,
that.
Also at the same time, sometimes you are worth it, or not. Sometimes you are worth it.
Yeah.
There's always.
Yeah, absolutely.
It might not feel like things are working out your way, but sometimes things just happen. Sometimes you stumble across things that help you out. I would have never guessed that I would be sitting right here talking about my experiences had I not decided to randomly watch a video and see a random comment about Spyro being cuter or something like that.
I love the way people find me, honestly. It's usually like the dorkiest things that I say. Yes, absolutely, yeah.
I mean...
Oh yeah, of course you can. That is...
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't... Experience. That was sort of a... Actually, it is relevant just in terms of, like, the way that I felt afterwards. I had a really weird sort of feeling like I don't deserve to be alive because of how close it was. What happened was I was in...
Right, like how did I get so lucky?
I was in a really tiny car.
Thing?
Like I was in like a Pontiac Sunfire, and I got hit by a semi on my side, and I survived with I had not a scratch on me. Like I was a little sore, but I've come off the board more sore than that. So like I had nothing. And the driver of the car had to like get X-rays and stuff, and she was pretty busted up. But me, not a thing at all.
That's wild.
And then with the way that the interactions that her and I had afterward, just she would talk about me in terms of like, she was upset that I would talk about it, and it's like, why would I not talk about it? And the way that she was describing me was as though she was talking about me like I wasn't there, like I was someone who found out about it and was spreading it like a rumor. Which is which is like, that's not fair. And she really said that my presence was this was what really hurt. She said that my presence in the car was inconsequential. So that...
What does she mean by that?
I took it to mean like, maybe it's just because of the self-worth thing, but I took it to mean like, if I would have died, it wouldn't have mattered. Yeah.
That's what it sounded like to me. Yeah.
I never never talked to her.
Jeez, that's harsh.
Because like that's the line for me.
I wouldn't.
And I was.
Yeah, especially after dealing with suicide and stuff, you don't need someone to tell you stuff like that. Very nice having you, Kyle. This has been a great.
I'd say. I would say I hope to come again, but then that would mean that I have more issues to talk about, and that's kind of like...
And we don't want that, yeah. Well, let's hope that there aren't any more issues.
That sort of thing.
Well, I will link, if it's okay with you, I will link
Absolutely
Kyle's
not
channel
okay, do not
in
do that.
the description. Okay,
just
no
kidding,
one can ever know who Kyle really is, sorry.
Nice.
Alright, cool, fantastic.
It's been great
having you, Kyle. Hopefully I'll get this up soon, and Yeah, if any of my viewers have any comments or anything to say to Kyle,
Nice.
tag him in my
I'll be there.
comment section. So, alright, cool. Have a great day, gals and pals, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.